I've really learned with this, you have to focus, like keep your focus on your mission, on what you're there for. And, we're here to serve our clients.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And I almost blew that. My tongue got stuck on that one.
You stuck the landing though.
Yeah,
right.
But I just pushed through it, and forced that word out. I wasn't going to let that word time up my tongue.
You Texans are pretty good about forcing your way through words, though. That's kind of the thing.
Or making them up as they go along too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then the reason you just said that is because for some reason when I do that, my accent gets extra strong. So, it doesn't take much for it to come back, and it'll be here probably the rest of the show now. So now you done it. In Camden ain't got any accent.
It comes out occasionally, but that's just, I was going to say it comes out occasionally, but it's more mimicry than accent at this point. Just some nice, good social mirroring. I do use y'all, though. Y'all is a constant with me. I'll say that.
Yes. Well, that's a good word to use. I mean,
it is.
It's simple.
Can I ask you, Dad?
And y'all is all
I do
inclusive.
This. And Luke, I'd love for you to answer on this also. Do y'all use y'all in your formal emails? Because I will type out y'all properly with the apostrophes and everything.
I use y'alls.
Yep.
I don't think I'll put y'all.
That's how
Oh, Luke, there's a challenge for the week. You got to work y'alls into an email.
We're going to see how many times I can add that in.
Perfect.
I mean, it's a great word. I don't know why, all them northern folks, Yankees as we used to call them, saying you guys and weird things like that. And y'all, the South was and is more inclusive than the North because we say y'all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yankees run around saying
not you guys.
Well, what are all the girls doing when I say you guys?
There you go, Dad. There's your platform.
you were inclusive and woke before it was cool.
That's right. Didn't even know I was woke. I was eyes wide open and I was woke. So speaking of woke, Luke, thanks for coming in, man. And what opened your eyes to the problem set of veteran health with your company ValorWell?
Real quick, Luke, I just got to say, Dad, good job sticking the landing on that transition. Also, I had no idea where the hell you were going with that. But, all right, we're good there. I just had to give you your props there.
Honestly, it was a personal struggle for us. So my family, we've got Champ VA, and they've had it for a while. And when we had some issues where our kids were needing mental health services, see somebody, we could not find anyone that accepted that insurance. Just nowhere. I reached out to several large companies. No one took it. No one wanted anything to do with it. We had dealt with a couple of years of paying out of pocket, and then you can send in through the regular mail for your reimbursement. But that process it's a special kind of hell. They can't even, if I send something into them in January, they can't even tell you that they've received it until 4 to 5 months later. It'll be in a stack or a pile. And then, it's a nightmare. But we've been dealing with that for several years, and finally we hit a point where we're like, hey, this is ridiculous. Can't do this anymore. We got to figure something out. Figured out what it took to get registered with the VA, specifically the Champ VA insurance for family. And I had no intention of starting a company. I figured out how to get registered, and then I went to every other company I could find be like, hey, can I get you guys registered? That you don't have to pay me. And they just immediately walk away. They don't want anything to do with it. So one day I just hit a point where I was upset, I was desperate and frustrated. A therapist, and I was like, we'll pay them cash, and we'll handle the billing on the back end. And when you say things to your wife and you're not expecting her to actually agree with it, like she's supposed to look at me and say, "You're an idiot," and says, "That's exactly what we should do. We should start that company, but not for us. We need to do it for everybody." Because at this point, we've come across hundreds of other families that are in the same boat. So, yeah, then I was like, okay, crap, here we are. I guess we're going to do this for real. So, yeah, we started things up. We went live this last November, and yeah, it's been a crazy experience ever since then. It's been just constantly growing. We've got more people involved than we could have ever imagined. And the thing that, like, I don't know, we've all experienced going to the VA trying to get care, and it takes forever. We all know that. But whenever it's our kids, like, because for me, trying to get into the VA when they say, hey, you can't get in, it's going to be months. Like, all right, I'll figure it out. But when it's your kids, it's like, man, no, I'm gonna bend heaven and earth to get them what they need. And yeah, that's kind of what got us our start, not just pure desperation.
I'm interested how you went from, recognizing the problem, diagnosing the problem there, and then not only deciding to take action, and pursue a solution, but specifically that solution. Because I always think that's an interesting thing. You see a problem there, like you could have done the insurance route, you could have started becoming a lobbyist. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different ways that you could have gone and attacked this problem. Why did you choose this business route?
So I've got a little bit of background. I've worked in healthcare for a few years as a physical therapist, and I've been a clinical director, so I've got some understanding on how to run some of the back end. Not anything near the level that we're doing now.
Right.
But trying to push for lobbying, we have reached out to our congressman about this issue. Everything is, hey, we'll look into it. We'll see what we can do. And I was just like, man, we've got to have a solution now. We have to have something now. And when we couldn't find anyone, like I said, I went to every other place imaginable trying to get them to do it, which is the irony of this, is that I got into this to never have to deal with the VA. And now I'm having to do it for everybody. Mm-hmm. But ultimately it just came down to like, hey, this has got to be done. No one's willing to step up and actually do this. So it was just that moment of like, hey, why not me? And believe me, there's a lot of reasons why not me. There's a lot of reasons why this random guy from Missouri shouldn't be the solution. But no one else has stepped up.
So how did you, because in order to become a business, you got to have systems. How did you take this, the personal drive, if you will, to fix it for your kids and maybe, a couple of folks that that you helped out before you said, you had the infamous conversation with your wife. Now you have to take that process and create a system out of it. How did you do that?
With a lot of work and a lot of manual processes. So when we started this, we had no idea that it was going to grow as quickly as it did. We built a website. Like I paid a guy on Fiverr like $200 to make us a real basic website, nothing fancy, just, hey, we've got a presence there. Because we know there's so many, scams and all this stuff out there. So it's like, hey, I want us to look fairly legitimate. So we did that. We created a Facebook page that we didn't even post anything on until I think probably like May of this year. But we created that. We built an EHR system, electronic health records. So that's where we like see the patients through, and we started reaching out to therapists. We started finding some people that would want to do it, and it's like, hey, you guys sign on through our system. They've got some systems out there already that are pretty good for doing that, and then follow-ups. You got all these CRM solutions out there, but when we're just running this out of our home, man, we were just following up manually. Mm-hmm. What's crazy is with no advertising or anything, we went, hey, our goal was get 5 to 10 people by the end of 2023. And again, we started on Veterans Day in November. In that amount of time, we had over 90 people sign up.
Wow.
Yeah. And at this point, like, man, we still hadn't even built anything to the VA. We were still trying to figure things out. It's been a mad scramble to figure things out, figuring out, hey, how do we handle, all the billing and stuff in the back end, what kind of systems we use. I think we've gone through 4 EHR systems.
Luke, to jump in there, at that point, are you, because I'm trying to picture it, I was working for an analogy here. I didn't really come up with a good one, so I'm just going to ask it in a boring way. But talking about your systems there and that influx of people, hitting 90 people in that, month and a half, right? Was it you had a system built and they broke it with that flow and you had to duct tape it back together, or was the system not even there when you had that many folks coming in? Where were you at? There wasn't
even a system there. Yeah,
okay.
There was not even the system there, not even remotely. Like, so
how the hell you make it through Christmas then?
Yeah, exactly. There was, and the crazy thing, because again, we didn't have, like, we were hoping for like 5 to 10 people, which, like, hey, I can manage making calls, following up with that, no problem. When you end up with that many, and there's all these people that are reaching out from all over the country, and like, hey, do you have therapists in my state? Like, man, I'm trying to get therapists in, trying to deal with all their registrations, everything. So we ended up, from that point, we started figuring out systems. And, there's a lot of people that we were just saying, hey, like, you're going to have to wait. We're trying, we're growing, but it takes time. As we were developing systems, you mentioned having them break. That's absolutely what started happening. We put a system in place, like, okay, we've got this figured out. And each time, by the time we got a system built, like, once we figured out, hey, this is what we need, let's build this out. And by the time we get it built out, we've already outgrown it. And it's been honestly, it's been a nightmare. There's been a lot of sleepless nights, sleepless weeks. But we ended up, now we've got a phenomenal team that's working with us on developing a custom back-end system for all of our appointments, patient management, so that we can be a lot more efficient with it. I actually ended up I built a CRM through Google Sheets and some other forms, just track and organize people so that we can follow up. But it's, the learning process through this, you always hear people talk about the unknown unknowns. And my gosh, there's so much of that in our process. We have signed up for so many systems. It's like, okay, this is going to work. And then we go, man, we didn't even think about this issue. And then you realize that, like, wow, the whole plan that we had is just a wash. Like, that's not even going to work. the example I always give my wife is I feel like someone's taken they've taken like 20, 100 or 1,000 piece puzzles, took out 50 pieces from all but one of them, put all the pieces in a bag and just shook them up. It's like, here you go, like, put together the right one. And, you know, kind of the same thing. You sit there going, like, okay, this is it. I'm getting it all put together. And then you realize, oh, crap, I don't have all the pieces for this one. This is the wrong thing. And you're back to square one. And that's how it's been a lot with this. I'll tell you, there's a reason that no one has tried to tackle this issue ever because it's a huge pain, but it's going to be super worth it. You know, we've got so many people that we've been able to help, and like the feedback that we're getting is just incredible.
So what's something in these, what are we at, 11 months ish, that if you had maybe paused a day as opposed to, all right, go grab that or grab this and go sort of thing. And if you had just, you know, taken a knee, if you will, and thought about it for 24 hours or even shorter, you go, oh man, damn, shouldn't have bought that piece of software or whatever. What's something that, because that's a great lesson, I think, for all of us to always be reminded of.
So I would say Salesforce. We got Salesforce this summer, and Salesforce is a great product. You know, there's a reason we ended up going with them, but as we were going, you know, we looked into like, okay, we get this, it's going to be able to be our source of truth, connect with all of our other systems. But then whenever you get it, you realize that, oh my gosh, not just the costs of having it, but then setting it up is a huge beast. And you got tons of extra costs associated with paying people for that to get stuff set up. Then all of your connections, you go through and you see, hey, there's all these programs that'll connect to it. But then once you actually get in there, you realize that, oh, there's a lot of costs. Like, yeah, this program will connect to it and automatically run stuff through for $1,000 a month. So it's like, like went into it with, hey, I did some basic information. And again, I think it was a point we were just swamped with people. We had hit 400 or 500 clients and like, gosh, we got to do something. And yeah, just like jumped into it and it was like, all right, that's not usable.
In that same kind of vein there, I'm curious because you're talking about it very much, and I think as entrepreneurs looking back, this is definitely how it usually is, but very much like rolling with the punches. Could you talk a little bit about the planning aspect with that? Because I'm sure you weren't quite literally next target, hit it, next target, hit it, next target, hit it, and you get out here 11 months later doing well. I'm sure there was some substance of a plan there. How did you balance those two? Because that's a tricky balancing act.
It is. So the difficulty has been, you know, everything that we're looking at, you know, we create these plans on how we're going to do things, but everything, you know, your timelines shift, so there's this thing called the counseling compact where like every therapist, they're required to be licensed in that specific state that they're treating in, which is kind of crazy when you think about for telehealth, because let's be real here, nothing in one state is that much different than another. So they're pushing through this compact where, hey, like we've got like 40 states that someone could sign up and treat in all of them. And it was like, awesome, cool. They were going to do that early 2024. It was like, fantastic. So we'll bring people on, you know, and we see all these patients that we've got coming in. It's like, hey, not a big deal because we're going to have that compact. We can get our therapist on and they can see at all these states. Well, then that gets pushed back to fall of 2024. Mm-hmm. Now, probably in spring of 2025. And it's like, okay, we had a plan here, and then it's like, nope, that's not going to work. Same with, we at one point had some investors looking into us to help push in some of the higher level systems, and we kind of put a pause on what we were doing because, hey, like, we had a plan, we were going to build something up that'll work really well for now, but then you have someone coming saying, hey, we're going to help you out, get to your like 3-year IT stack mark now. So you go, okay, cool, we'll wait. But then when things don't pan out in that realm, then you're like, okay, now got to go back. And there's just so many, there's a lot of times where you get that plan, and I think the best way to look at it is, and this is kind of my philosophy, what I've figured out is, don't count on, like, you have your plan that you're going to go for, but don't get too stuck on the details and focus on the need. Focus on, hey, what is our need right now? What is the needs of our clients? And let's do what we can do. And that's another big part, is knowing and identifying what things you can control, what things you can't. Because you might make a plan and you go, hey, we're going to, like, for TRICARE. So that was one thing that we were trying to get our TRICARE registration done, and that should have been done earlier this summer. And then they come back, and of course, TRICARE, that also means for us to be able to see community care patients like Texas West. And they keep going, well, we're changing things in our system. We'll get back to you like in January. It's like, okay, and everything in me is like, nope, we're going to do this now. But you have to say, you know what? We can't do anything about that. We'll set that aside. That's still a plan, but not something we can focus on right now. So at the end of the day, move on, focus on what you can control.
Dad, I got a question for you actually off of that came to mind. And you're our planning expert on the show, right? What do you think is more important, the plan or planning? And what I mean by that is, like, like note taking. The notes don't actually help you; it's the taking of the notes that helps you. What are your thoughts on that if you had to pick one? And I know it's kind of a weird little lightning round question to throw at you in the middle of the show, but
the planning. What's great about planning is you're talking things through, so you're thinking about actions in the future. You can think of planning. Professional athletes always talk about visualizing the game, visualizing the actions they're going to do and how that looks. That's what planning is. So the planning is more important than the plan, because what most people do, just like note taking, is they go through the planning piece of it and the plan sits up on the shelf. But because we've talked everything through, it's not like you're walking down the hallway, of the shop and going, okay, step 3 is turn it to the right. We're not doing that because we've talked it through. And I think that's why planning is more important than the actual plan. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And the planning, big thing is, as you're planning, as you're going through stuff, and you start really thinking about all the other options and things. That's where I think sometimes we get too focused on the plan. Once you create a plan, like, all right, this is the plan, this is what we're doing. And we've all been in businesses or, for those of us that served units where they're like, this is what we're doing. And it's like, well, have we thought about this here? Nope, this is what we're doing. There's no, and, especially in business, there's so many times where it's like, hey, this is our plan, but something changed. Mm-hmm. We need to replan. Yeah. We get back in planning and talk about it. And I mean, how many times, I can't tell you how many times I've had something where I'm talking to someone about an issue and they mention something that's just simple, just a perfect solution that I didn't even think about.
Yeah. And that always makes me snicker. And I can't remember what show or movie it was from, is, the guy going, stick to the plan, man. Just stick to the plan. I don't know where that came from, what show or anything, not sure, but I remember that.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, here's your big plan, that general, like, hey, where we're going. But, you're going to have things come up along the way, and the steps can change. The goal of the plan doesn't have to change, but you got to be open for the steps changing. Yeah. I mean, if I'm traveling through the woods and I got a map and it tells me, hey, get up to this spot here, go 3 miles down the river, and you find a cross, like, oh, there's a bridge right here. It's not on the map. Well, the instructions said to go that way, so I'm going to, like, no, you're just going to
take the bridge.
Hey, this is where we're at. Like,
well, in that aspect of planning, you mentioned investors. And I'd love to talk a little bit about, well, how did that come into being? And then the decision process that you and your wife, I'm guessing that's the leadership team still, went through to decide yes or no with the investors.
So that was the thing, we started actually reaching out to someone, a friend of mine, about processes and stuff and what kind of systems we're going to use. It was someone who's kind of worked in similar industries in the past with a lot of different stuff. So like, hey, let me pick your brain. And then they were like, hey, I've got another friend who's way more into this stuff. And that person, we started talking. They're like, well, man, what you're looking at here, like, you got a great business model, but why are you looking this small? Why are you looking to, build just a get you through system right now? I'm like, well, because that's what we can do. And then they were like, hey, we've got we can invest in this. We can get you all these, higher level systems that'd be in place and automations and stuff. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And, did a lot of the research involved there, got everything up, and ended up being a situation where they're, just like, hey, it's not a great time, not a good time right now. We need to wait a little bit before we do. So then we're just kind of stuck with, like, all right, like, what do we do? And what kind of stuck was, as we were in that, we had been making really good momentum, and we kind of paused for a bit because we're like, hey, we're focusing on that aspect of it. And then when it didn't, it was like, all right, well, there we just, had a lot of balls that got dropped along the way because we were counting on that.
Yep.
And, and then, hey, adjust, like we were talking about before, the planning. You have a plan, and sometimes, hey, it does not work like you think it's going to. And sometimes you're traveling through the woods and you find a shortcut.
Yep.
That you realize, like, that's not a shortcut. All right, I got to go back.
But I'm curious with that. Talking about the investors there, I know I had this once, and to be fair with this story, I did not have an operational business when I went kind of down this, good idea fairy rabbit hole type thing. But at the same time, I think there's still a lesson there of, I had a agricultural operation that was looking at possible investment, these kind of things, and basically the question came into me. Well, it's like, well, if you were going to do this, it would have to be X number. I think the number was like 10 million. And it's like, okay, well, if I was going to do a $10 million investment, then I would need a farm that's worth $10 million. And so I started building this giant business plan, going through all this crazy stuff of like all this super high tech, huge farm, all this kind of stuff. We're going to put out so much and all of that. And then never happened. And I look back on that as this like, hey, was it fun? Of course, it was fun to build up that business plan. Don't get me wrong. And it's an exciting thing. It's a good exercise, all that kind of stuff. But I think there's this weird thing in more your kind of example, Luke, where it's like you have this business, you need to operate here, but then at the same time, you also want to be ready for that big jump when it comes. Could you talk, maybe even looking back in retrospect now, some of those lessons of how you could have maybe balanced that better, or any other wisdom from your experience with that?
So like how we manage when you get to that point where you're operating, but you want to jump up.
Right. And continuing level. Your current operations while preparing for the potential, $10 million investment or whatever. If you got to pontificate a bit, that's all right.
That's tough. Because when we were doing this, as we were going through, I was still working my full-time job while running ValorWell and trying to handle those things at that time, and it was a lot. I don't know how I could have done things too differently, but I would say looking back, what I would say is, if you've got your business going, if it is if you're operational, you're running, and someone comes through and says, "Hey, we can ramp you up. We can get you, up to that higher level quick." I think the big thing is if I could go back, I would say, you know what? Let's listen to what they're doing. Let's, follow through on that, but don't put so much into it, because you still got to focus on running operations. And at the end of the day, we didn't need it. It's, it would have been a nice boost, but it's not something that we absolutely needed. And looking back, it's like, man, we dropped the ball on a lot of things, a lot of follow-ups that we could have been doing sooner with people that we didn't, because we were focused on that. And I think that's the big thing here is I've really learned with this. You have to focus, keep your focus on your mission, on what you're there for. And, we're here to serve our clients. So whenever something comes up like that, we're like, hey, we can boost you, we can help you out with this stuff. Should have looked at it and said, hey, we can put some effort into there and some focus, but only what we have left after taking care of our clients. I think that's a big part.
And that's such a great point too. And I've talked with lots of startup CEOs, founders, and one of the things that they all talk about, and then I've also been part of venture capital groups, and the good venture capital groups will tell you, don't take on an investor unless you absolutely need one. And then you talk to the founders who are running the pitch cycle, the pitch circuit, if you will, that distracts from what they're really wanting to do, the love of solving a problem that they started their business. And just like you mentioned, you have to be careful as that founder from serving your clients to serving investors. And you got to play that game, and you really have to be consciously aware of those decisions that where you spend your time and your effort. Have you in retrospect caught yourself going one way more than you think you should have in that?
As far as the investors,
Yeah.
oh yeah, definitely. When we started talking to them, because again, we had a plan, and we could have had things working real well. And when the investors come through and go, hey, well, why wouldn't you do it this way? Why wouldn't you do that? And you start, it gets you thinking like, oh, okay, like, yeah, that's how, why am I not doing that? Especially if you got someone else that's real successful saying like, oh, like, why aren't you doing this? Well, I guess I should. And as you start going, you realize that like, yeah, when I look back at how much time I've spent, like when we signed up for Salesforce, trying to figure that stuff out, trying to get it all set up, which I'll tell you, there's a reason they do charge so much. It's not something you want to do on your own.
Yeah.
Spent so much time doing that and all these other things that we were looking into. It's like, man, that's not even what we needed to focus on at all. And if we had just focused on where we're at the whole time, and like now we're well back on track, but like we wasted so much time and effort on doing something that somebody else told us this is how you should be doing it, rather than just doing what we knew was the right thing. Reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the businessman who traveled down to Mexico for vacation and saw a guy that was out fishing.
Yep.
And the guy would go out, like, comes back with a big fish each day, hangs out with his family, just party, and businessman's like, well, you should get a bigger boat, hire a team, you go out and get tons of fish, do all that, and work your butt off for 50 years, and then you can relax and hang out with your family.
Yeah.
And thank God that guy said, no, that's stupid. But I think we get caught up in that, where we start going, we start listening to the wrong people, and especially, man, when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, you have no idea half time what you're doing. So it's real easy to hear advice from somebody else and think, okay, that's what I need to do.
That guy, look how successful he is. Wow, yeah, I should do what he says.
Right. And at the end of the day, it's like, it's advice. It's advice, and that guy may have become real successful doing it a certain way, but there's a lot of other people who've been successful doing it differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add on that before, because I was going to shift subjects there, but that's something I think about a bunch, because I've talked about it on the show before, or at least in private with you a bunch, maybe on the show. But this idea of how many folks we get on here, and there's these great successful, they're these 55, 60-year-old men, and they're very successful, retired, and they're like, gosh, I just spent so much time with my family. And, it was after my second marriage that I realized, and I was just like, gosh, why am I learning from these guys? There's a lot to learn from, don't get me wrong. But it's like, that is right. Clearly you're off on that. You can't have, and I always think as an entrepreneur, you see that, and then you see the fisherman example there, right? And he's just getting by, just doing enough and staying there. Folks, there's the happy medium. You can have a life. You can go coach rugby and have a wife and a kid and all this kind of stuff, all that fun stuff that I enjoy. You can go do all that while growing a business. And you just have to be aware of how you're growing the business. And look, like if I was going to grow all the way and, screw off my family and all this kind of thing, yeah, I probably could grow the business faster. I probably could. But I want both at the same time. And it doesn't mean you're not going to grow it. It doesn't mean you can't do both. But it's like you have to take that advice, take the nugget that's in that advice that they're hiding in there, and apply that to your own life rather than trying to match somebody else's path there.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, you always have to ask yourself, is this going to be worth it if I succeed?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going to have to do it at the cost of your family, and I've had, like that was part of the reason I left the military. I knew, like, man, I could stay in, but I'm not going to know my kids. Being infantry, we're in the field constantly. And it's like, sure, I can financially provide for them and be set for life and all this stuff, but I'm never going to be around them growing up. And at the end of the day, like, is that worth it? Like, no. And yeah, like, we want to build this, help as many people as we can. And, but I have to remind myself a lot that, like, hey, I cannot ignore my wife, my family. And, there's definitely times, for any young entrepreneur, they're going to figure out there's going to be periods where, like, hey, me and my wife are just passing in the wind. And that's like, hey, like, we're doing this for a little bit, short period, but you just have to make sure that it's not, it doesn't become the norm, and that you're not letting it consume you. I think that's the big thing, is always remember your why and your values, and don't let anything else take away from that.
Oh yeah. I in that whole thought process of, keeping your priorities straight and your values at hand, what was the process that you and your wife, I'm including her in these decisions, just making the assumption.
Me and her are y'all. We're y'alls.
Yeah. that y'all made in the, all right, step away from the consistent paycheck and turn the side gig into a full-time gig.
That was a tough one. I would say that was a really, really tough one. We had to get to a point where we realized that, hey, this is not going to, like, it's not going to thrive unless we bump this to a higher level of effort and input. And again, focusing on what's important. Do we want this to work? And there's a lot of prayer, a lot of us just kind of figuring out. One of the things I realized through starting this is that every step along the way, the more I've tried to keep control over how things go, the more I've tried to be like I'm going to make things work the way I want it to. It hasn't worked out. But the more I let go of the wheel and just hey, I'm going to focus on what I know is the right thing and what I need to do, everything just falls in place. Great example of that would be, so we've got a team right now that's doing, writing out, creating all this back-end tech stuff for us. And the crazy thing was, when we reached out to so there's a company that we're kind of purchasing the EHR base from, and when I talked to them, and they're like, okay, well, you're going to have a developer. You're going to have some really good IT people to actually build this, implement it. And he was like, hey, do you have someone for that? And I went, yeah, absolutely. I did not. Absolutely didn't have anybody. But we were running, it was after the kind of investor stuff didn't work, and I was like, hey, we've got to move forward. We've got to get this figured out. And by God, I'm gonna figure it out some way, anyway. And I reached out to that dude. So we got set up. The very next day, we had someone reach out kind of in crisis. And then we, after talking to them, they had somebody else that was in crisis they were wanting some help with. And this person says, hey, I love what you're doing. I'd love to do something to help. And through the conversation, it turned out that he was in IT.
Wow.
And not just in IT, but over a whole huge department of this. And I was like, hey, can we just can I pick your brain for a little bit? to tell us where we're going wrong or things we do better. And he's like, oh, dude, we could build this whole thing out for you.
Wow.
Like, we could build all this. We'll do the whole thing. I'm like, oh, my God. Like, and stuff like that where I was like, man, we just, it was on a day where I was already swamped. I had so much going on. So, when I was like, hey, can you like reach out to this person? They're needing some help. Like, fine. That's what we're here for. Let's do it. And yeah, like when we let go of the wheel, it's kind of like, I don't know, they always say like, Jesus, take the wheel here, and I don't know if like, however people want to look at it, whether it's God, giving it over to him or the universe or karma, whatever it is. I think when you just focus on this is what we're here for, and you really put your belief and trust in that, the universe delivers. And it sounds stupid, and I part of me hates saying that 'cause like, no, I want to make it happen, but it's really how things do work.
I'm curious on that, talking about letting go of things, that kind of approach. There's an aspect of your business that I think it's an interesting aspect of control, which is the outcomes of it. So this is always something I think I love to ask folks when they have either like the dispersed team or a different kind of product where it's really personal, those kind of things. How do you work to control those outcomes for the customers? Making sure that they are, getting a good therapist. The therapist is actually showing up properly, giving them the things that you want ValorWell to stand for to fulfill your values and your mission. When you don't get to touch many of those aspects there, like talk about letting go, there's a lot there that you've let go of. How do you work to control those outcomes while still, letting them be free like that?
First of all, I don't control the outcomes on that stuff at all. I don't even try. So the thing what I've learned, I really like, there was a interview with Simon Sinek where he had talked about the stupidity of CEOs talking about how they care about their clients. Because like you don't care about your clients, or you don't care about every employee. You can't. You care about maybe 10. But you don't know all these people. And
right.
The thing that I've told all of our therapists is, and we're very specific about who we bring in. I personally interview every single therapist we have to make sure they're going to be a good fit for our culture, make sure they've got a good heart for it. But the thing I tell them is that I'm not here to serve the clients. Mm-hmm. ValorWell is here for the clients, but my job is to serve them. So that is pure, like 100%. I am there to serve our therapists so that they can serve the clients, because that's their job. And as long as our people are happy, like I give them full autonomy. I don't go through and tell them, hey, you need to do this kind of treatment. You need to do that kind of treatment. Hey, you need to see them this often. Like whatever they determine is the right thing for that client, I just let it go. The only time I'm going to step in is if I have someone complaining. If I have, and even then, hey, people are going to complain about Santa Claus. That's kind of my philosophy. If we start getting like a repeat thing about someone, then hey, we'll talk about it. But I think a big thing is when you make sure that you put a lot of focus and control in who you bring in and who you put in charge, then you can just let go of it. And you say, hey, like, I know this is handled. Like, I know our patients are being taken care of because I know our therapists. So because of that, I don't need to go micromanage. I don't need to go check any of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what I learned today about is just it's a reminder that I'm going to emphasize for everybody else out there, and the whole planning thing is, don't get stuck on the details, man. You know, the assumptions and the need to put the nitty gritty into the plan. You know, if you're not sure, you know, just assume that it's going to be that way and start moving and get into execution mode. It's a heck of a lot. You know, I always say it's a heck of a lot easier to steer your steer your canoe when it's going forward than when it's sitting still. So just think about that. Cam,
I like that.
Cam, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
Yeah, for me, I got kind of silly one today. If y'all saw me, Luke and Dad, you saw me going on mute a few times there. So I was reading the other day that the A-10s are done; they're getting retired or something. But the A-10s in Tucson fly over my house about 4 times a day still. So whatever I read about that, I must have misunderstood the headline there. That's what I learned today.
Luke, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
You know, they relearned that importance of the planning. You know, I like what you had said there, the difference between planning and a plan. And that's something just kind of reinforced that, hey, like, that is really important to keep just replanning on things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Luke, how do folks find you, connect with you, learn more about ValorWell?
So you can find ValorWell on Facebook or on ValorWell.org. So you can find us there and then sign up directly from the website. Just go to Become a Patient. And right now, so we are taking patients that have Champ VA insurance and in most states, community care as well. So
awesome. Well, thanks. Yep. Thanks for your time today, and thanks for coming up with a awesome solution that's going to help our fellow veterans get the care that they earned.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. This is awesome time to be able to pick your guys' brains and be able to connect a little more with other people that have been successful in the veteran community.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Luke Predmore, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.